what creativity does, it allows for applying, I think, multiple perspectives. So it can instigate curiosity, flexible thinking, problem solving. And I think that then leads to generating different ideas and solutions to problems. And I think it helps in leading towards innovation. And in education in particular, because we are preparing people to manage a future which is going to be very different from what we have known. If we don't give them those opportunities to start developing those skills, then it becomes all the more difficult when they're in the workplace itself.
Yes, I'd agree with you. And at the same time, in terms of resources, creativity requires a lot of time. It requires periods where students are not busy doing. They have time to reflect, and very often creativity doesn't have tangible outcomes that are measurable. So in education, how do we overcome these obstacles of not having those measurable outcomes that inspectors, for example, may be looking for, or the in terms of the data? Because it's so difficult to measure, how is it possible to promote it in education?
It may be difficult to measure somebody's creativity or their creative thinking or their creative ability, but what it does do is when activities are well structured and planned, where you are going to give your learners an opportunity to work together, to come to a solution. Sometimes things may succeed and sometimes things may fail. And that's the gamble you take with creativity. But it is from those mistakes and those errors that new thinking and new ideas can be generated. So even though those skills, the creativity in itself cannot be measured, I think what it can lead to, the impact it can lead to, or the product it might lead to, is a measurable outcome of a well-planned creative activity.
And sometimes those activities don't have immediate tangible outcomes. You know, sometimes it could be in 2 years' time, 2 years further down the road, like some sort of deep learning has taken place, but we won't really see the impact of it until students have actually left the course.
Absolutely. So I think what we are then measuring is the skills that are generated through the creative activities. So in developing, as I said, their problem solving skills or their outside the box thinking skills, which generate something which is tangible. Okay, the deeper learning can hardly ever takes place in any instance of whether it be at the end of a lecture or an activity. You can only see how much impact something has had as time goes by. But the immediate impact of the students, the learners being able to produce something tangible, and the fact that they've been able to do it through problem solving by themselves, rather than the solutions being presented to them, I think that's a good enough start. And if we don't start it within education, how else is it going to be developed?
Yes, that's very interesting, and I agree with you. And one thing that you and I share as educators is our love and our enthusiasm of research. But perhaps you'll agree with me that when we started our research all those years ago, there isn't a lot of investment in educators being researchers.
Absolutely.
Especially in the further education sector. You know, we were pioneers in that respect, because it was acknowledged that in further education, there is no resources, there are no resources available for us to have time set aside to do research, and we did it in our own time.
Absolutely. And that is what continues to happen when it does happen. I have been looking at some of the Education and Training Foundation's projects, like the Professional Exchange Networks and the Observation for Teaching and Learning projects. And practitioners that I have spoken to are the ones who are naturally enthusiastic, like yourself and me, who have a genuine interest in learning something new for themselves, as much as then being able to carry that into their classrooms. But you're right, there is no time given for them to really focus on it. So they're having to do it in their own time. Sometimes the great results and the great findings, there is no enthusiasm or interest from the organizations in using that. And I think in our sector as a whole as well, I think sometimes we shoot ourselves in the foot. We have and we generate really wonderful things, but they tend to fizzle out. And that can be a damper on creativity. So it only then always will be a handful of people who will continue to want to do and improve and develop themselves. And that's the sad part of our sector, really. But I think it's similar in schools as well. I don't think school teachers have any time to do any kind of research or are given time out.
There is a lot more funding and resources for the compulsory education sector, but
there is.
We're in that the further education in between school and university, we are that neglected sector, because we are most, further education colleges were set up for the most disadvantaged, marginalized members of society. And it's as though we as teachers are marginalized and treated as being, like not mainstream, basically, and we're neglected. We're the second cousins.
Absolutely true. Absolutely true. But I honestly think if we really are interested in investing in our sector, we need to do something about it ourselves, in terms of agencies that we become members of. I think those agencies need to work together, which doesn't always happen. And therefore, the public money often gets distributed so that everybody gets the thin end of the stick rather than a big pot. And what has happened in my experience, I mean, I came into this sector pretty late compared to many of my colleagues. I started only in 2001. And I have always jumped in and been part of every project that was coming up. But what I find is the wheel just goes round and round, and we are doing the same things again and again, the same research again and again. I mean, all of what we did, I mean, some of the new projects are all focusing on that as well. So what happened to it? It stayed with the practitioner, I yourself and myself, and we used it, but it wasn't ever used in the wider sector. And I think that's one of the weaknesses of our sector.
Yes, it is, because the research is not taken seriously. When I was doing the PhD research, I contacted around 250 further education colleges, and in a lot of them, the principals said that the staff were too busy to participate.
Yes.
So the message was not even conveyed to the members of staff for them to make decisions on their own behalf. It was the principals, it was the leaders who were saying, no, too busy. They've got, they have to be focused on the teaching. That further education is about teaching. It's not about research.
Yeah, but I think that is where the weakness is. It is in the senior leadership in most of the colleges. And I think it's a very short-sighted response, because if at least those practitioners who are interested and who are keen, if they are given just, I don't know, 5 days in a year to go and do something like that and bring it back, and then for the organization to acknowledge it and use it and promote it, I think that's where the shortfall is. Sometimes, as in my case, the organizations were very happy. Oh yes, you can do it. I mean, I never asked for extra time because I knew that was not going to be given. Even when I did my master's, I asked for extra time and I wasn't given, but I did it for myself. So at least if you encourage those who are interested and then willing to listen to what they have brought back and see how that can be disseminated widely, just even within the organization, never mind the sector, I think it can make such a big difference And it's very short-sighted of our leaders not to allow that, to be honest.
Not to invest in research. Yes.
Absolutely.
And the teachers that I did interview regarding creativity, these were
Yes.
teachers who, like yourself, like myself, were willing to go the extra mile and do things, extracurricular activities, which they
Yes.
didn't have time for during the the normal part of the curriculum.
Yes.
And that requires a lot of sacrifices to be made.
Yes.
Family time is taken over, and so it's not an ideal, it's not a sustainable situation.
It isn't. It isn't, and that's why, as I said, I was looking at these projects that the ETF has been promoting, and if you look at the number of colleges within the UK and the thousands of teachers that teach within the sector, part-time or full-time, the amount of people who actually participate is very small. And in most organizations, it will be either one person or at the most two. In very few organizations, I've seen a group of people who have come together to do something and then use it widely within their organization. And that's only happening in the very, very large, the integrated FE colleges, which are much larger and have a much more bigger staff workforce.
Okay, yes. So again, as part of my research, what I noticed confirms what you're saying, is that out of the 250 colleges that I researched, only 7% were promoting creativity through their
Yes.
mission statements, their value statements. Less than 7%.
Yes.
I was quite disappointed by that.
Yes. And in my experience, even when that is part of their mission statement, I don't see a lot of it happening. So
Yeah.
they want creativity in the classroom. They want our students to develop those skills. And it's only, well, let's say the few who are interested in giving that to their learners pass on the benefit of it. Otherwise, the rest of the students in the organization, I mean, I have taught students who have been taught by others as well. And they always say, but you make us do things very differently. Why can't you just tell us what to do? Because they're so used to being just told. Because it's the easy thing to do, isn't it? It's easy for us to just plan a lesson where you can just tell them to do this, that, or the other. And I know how much time it takes to plan something which is really going to instigate their own thinking.
Yeah.
And and the colleges want it, Ofsted wants it, the government wants it, because employers want it. They want people to come in with these skills already. But if, as you say, if they don't invest in the teachers within the sector, it's very difficult. But the other point is university lecturers who are engaged in research. I heard a very curious statement once from someone who was part of the Oxford research team. And she said they are employed, basically they're paid to carry out the research. But a lot of the research just sits on a shelf gathering dust.
Yeah, you see, this is the reason why this conference is, I'm targeting academics, educators and entrepreneurs. There's a reason for that. The reason is what you've just said, that some academic research sits on shelves gathering dust.
Yes.
And on the other hand, we have educators, and we've, you and I are both educators that we did the research in our own time, and most of our colleagues don't have the resources available to them to actually do the research. And also, this is another shocking fact is that we don't have access to the academic research. As a lecturer, as a further education lecturer, we don't have access to the databases that contain like the up-to-date knowledge.
Yes, that's right. Yes, absolutely right. Yeah. It is quite frustrating. I mean, I've sort of retired now, so I won't be participating in any more research. But my interest and my love for learning new things continues. But again, I'm just doing it for my own self. And I'm just happy that the students that I had the privilege to work with, I have been able to pass down the same sort of ethos. And it is great to see that some of them are actively participating in little projects, I mean, mini projects, but at least they are. So.
On a positive note, though, there's a lot of encouragement nowadays for academics to engage in public engagement, as it were. So
Yeah.
to, you know, you say that you're doing research for your own benefit, but in a way, it's not just only for your own benefit, because you're willing to share it, you're willing to take part in conferences like this.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. Yeah, definitely. I think that the message has to be taken on board by leaders. And I mean, I do understand from their perspective, they have the pressure of having to work within a specific amount of means that they have been allocated through the government funding, and that becomes their priority. But I think we have a responsibility to make sure that the students who are coming to us are being sent out with the right skills that they will need for employment. And employers are asking for these things because people don't have critical thinking skills. They don't have problem solving skills. They can't manage things at work unless someone tells them exactly what they need to do. And employers are asking for it. So if this sector has to have the same recognition as universities do, and not be the poor sister within education, I think the leaders will have to wake up. And of course the government, I mean, the government, to be fair, does give a certain amount of funding for research, because otherwise organizations like the ETF or the AOC wouldn't be able to support any of it. But I think what they need to do is take on board that they need to release time for their teachers, at least the ones who are interested, to go and carry out the research and then bring it back and use it for the benefit of the organization. So I think a little bit of outside the box thinking by the leaders themselves would be very useful.
Yes, and especially in times of austerity.
Yes, yes. And it doesn't really have to cost much. It really does not have to cost much.
Is that this is when we need creativity, you know.
Yes.
It's all these, like during these like at least 10 years we've
Yes.
had to scrimp and save, and creativity is an essential ingredient to help us to overcome that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I mean, I've done a lot of little projects when I was working at City Lit, for example, and all of those projects actually didn't cost a lot. And if you enthuse the people who are already very interested in developing themselves, they're willing to even, as you said, give up their time to do it for the sake of the good of the students, because that's where their interest lies.